Character analysis. This is a stage of prep at which the script has been picture locked, which I believe it has, at least for our purposes. As an actor, you get cast and you receive a script, and your job is to take whatever's on the page, add to it a lot, and create a three-dimensional, breathing, living being based on whatever amount of information you get. Now, obviously, if we're talking about a role like, say, a waiter in a movie that comes up to a table with the main actor and says, "Your coffee, sir," and then walks away and never to be seen again, you don't really have to do all this work. You could. I would, just for fun. Yeah, but, obviously everybody knows what it's like to put down a cup of coffee on the table and say, "Your coffee, sir." You don't really have to, analyze the deep meaning behind those lines. You can obviously, stand out with your performance, even with one line, if you know how to be organic in front of the camera and how to take your environment into the account and how to react to what else is happening in the scene. But again, you don't have to do a full analysis, because what I'm going to go through right now is what I do to prep for a character, and it might sound a little bit overwhelming because it's a lot, genuinely. However, you also have to understand that once you have done it a couple of times, it becomes a lot faster and easier to do it. It isn't necessarily as scary as it sounds. I will post these notes up in the Uncanny Scouters Discord afterwards for those of you who are interested. So, you read the script the first time, and after you read the script the first time, you basically go through the basics, which are your first 5 questions, 5 W's, right? The who, the where, the when, the what, and the why. And it is an overarching one. It's not specific. We're going to get into the specificity afterwards, but obviously, who is your character? Define them, what is their age, what is their occupation, who they are as a person. This is, again, all just the starter. This is a starting point. You will do those who, where, when, what, and why for an audition in more detail, for example, because you don't really have a lot to go off in the audition. But for the script, this is just the starting point. The where, in our case, kind of maintains itself throughout the whole script. Even though it changes subtly, scene to scene. This is, again, a general where, right? So at this stage, you will describe the world. You will describe the state of the world, right? So where in New York would be very different from where in Sahara Desert. It would be very different from where in a small village in the middle of Russia. And depending on where it is your character is, they're also going to be a very different person and behave very differently. Then we have when, which is time, not only in terms of time of a day or time of a year, but also in terms of the era. If it's a period piece, it could be in 17th century, right? But when affects your character as well as where, because the time of a day, the time of a year, and the time in general, the time period, will instruct you how you behave, how you feel. If it's night, you may be tired. If it's during the day, you may be super amped for something. If it is during the winter, you would be wearing a lot of clothes and maybe you'd be cold. So things like that. What is it your character doing? What is they're actively doing? And why is more so their objective. Why are they doing what they're doing? What is it they're trying to achieve? So once you have those first basic answers, you will generally read the script again, and you'll start digging into the meat of it. At this point, you want to start creating your character's background and bio. So I'm going to go over this really quickly, even though it is a lot, and usually if I do it, it comes out to 20-30 pages. But this is a general guidance that is good to have when you're creating your character background. Background of your character is not necessarily going to be in the script. There's going to be hints to it. What your character says about themselves and what other characters say about your character, and how your character behaves will hint at what might have happened in their past, but it is up to you to fill it out and, you know, create the whole backstory. So when I create my character's background and bio, I use a list of questions or a list of topics that was given to me by one of my teachers in my degree program. And I believe Abby has the same list. And this is the list. So the first one is family. Obviously, you want to go into detail about what your character's family is like, how many siblings they have, do they have both parents, how it affected them, what kind of relationship they have with their parents and their siblings, how their family shaped their worldview, were there any kind of traumatic events in their family, and so on and so forth. Again, you can write as little or as much as you'd like on each topic, but the more in detail you go, the more it will inform who your character is as a person and really shape them. The second one is sex and gender. Obviously, it could be two very different things because, you know, your character, for example, could be transgender or androgynous, or maybe even genderless if you're playing a creature of some sort, for example, right? Like maybe you're playing an elf or something that like doesn't really have thank you, something that doesn't really have sex or gender as the same way as the human does. And by sex I don't mean like the act of it, I mean you know, the genitalia or whatever. So as a woman in 15th century, for example, you will have a very different experience than as a man in 21st century. So your sex and gender will very much, and your gender identity will very much affect your experiences in life and shape you as a person. Third one is economic and social status. Obviously, I don't think I need to explain that a poor person and a rich person will have very different childhood and get affected by things very differently. As the same way with the social status. Fourth is environment, as in climate, as in physical environment. So if you grew up in a very hot environment or very cold environment, if you had natural disasters, if you had to live through crazy snowy winters or tropical storms every summer, all of this stuff will also have an effect. Number 5 is education, actual specific formal education, whether you went to school, what kind of school you went to, how that school again affected you, what happened during the schooling, how your teachers treated you, all of that good stuff. Number 6 is intelligence, like actual book smarts, because somebody like, for example, Matt Damon's character in Good Will Hunting did not necessarily go to school, but he is extremely intelligent. So those are not necessarily conflated together. Now, number 7 is emotional intelligence, which yet again something different, because again, Matt Damon's character in Good Will Hunting is not incredibly emotionally intelligent despite being very smart. So how emotionally intelligent your character is, how self-aware your character is, how it affects them, how it affects their relationships. Number 8 is culture. So, you know, the culture they grew up in. If that culture is real and grounded in real world, like, you know, being from Mexico, like Carlos is, or from Ukraine, like we are, or from wherever Rain's from. these I'm kidding, that was a joke. He's Canadian American. Anyway, this will also affect your character, whether they maintain their traditions, how they feel about their culture. Do they welcome their culture, or are they trying to separate themselves from it? All of this will go into this part. Then number 9 is spiritual ideology. What are they like spiritually? What do they believe in? How it affects them? Do they follow any organized religion? Number 10 is life experiences. So in this part, you would go in depth about anything and everything that could have happened to your character that affected them. So did they go through a horrible breakdown when they were in 8th grade? Did they really want to get into a project and got passed over? Did their homework not get graded properly and they got really upset? You know, like all of these little things that potentially could have created the traumas or shaped the way your character would react to something, and created triggers, even, if you will. We'll go into this part of it. Number 11 is lineage. That's, again, you know, going back to your family further than your immediate family, right? Like, where is it your family coming from and how it affects you? So, for example, if we're playing in a period piece and your character is of royal blood, your lineage is going to be very important, and you have to have a point of view about that lineage. which is something that is also very important. All these things your character has to have a point of view about. It may be the same point of view that you, the actor, have. It may be a very different point of view. It depends on how it informs your character and what you got from the script. But everybody has a point of view about everything and anything. So that is a very important thing to have. Now, number 12, mental and physical health. So here you will talk about any kind of physical limitations you have, any kind of mental illnesses, any kind of injuries, any kind of previous sicknesses and experiences. Like has your character recovered from something, you know, that was like a terminal disease, or maybe they're currently having one, or maybe they had an injury that like knocked them out of the sports team. All of this is obviously going to also inform who your character is. Number 13 is social influences. Number 14 is politics. Number 15 is historical events that your character lived through or was adjacent to and how they affected him, obviously. Number 16 is race. Again, it will affect your experience. Number 17 is sexuality, identity, and sexual experience. Now, this is about sex and about what your character thinks about it and what kind of experiences they had. Have they been assaulted? Have they had fantastic experiences? Are they bisexual? Are they in the closet? All of this is going to go into this part. Number 18 is addictions, substance addictions, and otherwise. Like one can be addicted to their phone, for example, right? That's a character choice. Now 19 is substance abuse, not to be confused with the other. Substance abuse is when specifically your addictions are growing into an issue for you and others around you. Number 20 is parental influence, more specifically your close relationships with your parents. Number 21 is physical appearance. Again, that is also going to have an effect on how you're treated in the world. And number 22 is physicality. Not the appearance, but the actual body language. Number 23 is innate talents. Does your character have any kind of born-in talents that, like, you know, maybe he's a genius pianist, or maybe she is a brilliant ballerina. All of that stuff. Thank you, Richindi. Number 24 is media and how the media affects your character. Does your character consume any media? Are they a bookworm? Do they love comic book movies? Are they so obsessed with the news they can't peel their eyes off of the TV and just keep repeating whatever they're hearing on the news?
Makes me feel good.
Thank you, Afro. And 25th era. So this is more general about the time your character lives in and how that time affects your character and what limitations that time imposes on your character. And then obviously for our sake, I added number 26, mostly for the movies and the scripts that are not based in reality necessarily and are set in a different world. I set number 26 as a world background where you would go into more detail about how this world is different and how the environment of your world is different from the real world. So, you know, that was a lot of talking, but all of these categories, I'll post the list later, will tell you who you are as your character, who you are as a person, and will really help you react to even small things. Because if you know that, like, I don't know, your mom got really pissed if you, like, said this one word, and then you say it in the script, you'll have a very different reaction, right? It will have a very different meaning, as opposed to if you did not do all of that background work. It will just be a word, nothing special. So once that all work is done, you don't have to, like, actively remember what it is that you've created for your character. It will kind of sink into you and happen intuitively once you've, like, gone over it a couple of times. So you don't have to, like, go and sit and be like, okay, in the 5th grade my mom got really pissed, you know, like, that's just going to be there in the back of your mind. It's going to inform your work. Now, more actively working with a script, again, you have to go through the script and figure out what it is that your character says about themselves. But remember that characters lie. Characters are people. So whatever your or other characters say may not be true. What does your character say about themselves? What do other characters say about your character? Are they lying? Ultimately, characters are always pursuing either love or power. What it is your character pursuing and why. what relationships does your character have with every other character that you come across, right? So you have to define who that character is to you. You have to figure out what do you want from that other character, generally speaking, and what is your obstacle, right? So for example, if this character is your best friend, then maybe you want acceptance and comfort and support, and maybe your obstacle is that friend is also going through something and they don't have the mental space to deal with you right now. So like all of these things will also inform how you talk to the character, because you talk to your best friend very differently than you talk to your boss, very differently than you talk to your enemy. All of this is going to change the line reading. Thank you, Les. What is your character arc generally? Like, does your character begin as like a mean know-it-all and ends as a very empathetic but like confused person that doesn't know anything at all anymore? Is it the opposite arc? Do they begin as a villain and end in redemption? So what is your general arc? Because you have to figure that out, and then within it work out all of the little changes scene by scene that happen to your character. Then each scene, once you start working on like scenes one by one, each scene has to have, it's a mini story of its own. It has a beginning, a middle, and end. And it has to have a moment before, because it doesn't happen in a vacuum. You came from somewhere and something happened to you there. So it has to have the moment before. You have to understand where you're coming from and what state you're in when you enter the scene. It has to have an objective. You're trying to accomplish something in each scene. Whether it be something big or something minor, like getting attention from the other character, there is an objective. And then there usually is an obstacle, otherwise the scene wouldn't need to happen. What is it that's stopping you from your objective, and how is it you're going to overcome it? So these are the questions to ask yourself when you're analyzing each scene. Where am I right now, physically? Where have I just come from the moment before? When is it? What do I want, the objective? Why do I want it, which is your inner monologue, inner reasoning for the character. Why do I want it right now, which is what's the urgency and what are the stakes? What will happen if I don't get it now, right? So like, what is it that's making you trying to pursue it right now? And what must I overcome, which is the obstacles. And also, while I remember, when you're thinking about where, it's not as simple as, thank you, Rain, for gifting 5 subs. Trying to shut me up. It's not as simple as I'm in a library, so I'm gonna talk quietly, or I'm outside, so my whole voice has to carry, or I am, I don't know, in a jail, like whatever. It's not just that. Where is going to be more physical. Like, are you hot? Are you sweating? Are you like really trying to, just like get some air into your lungs because it's so fucking hot, right? Or are you really cold, so you're going to kind of talk through your jaw a little bit like that, maybe even shiver a little bit, and you're like really struggling, right? So your environment is going to inform a lot more than just, like, oh, yeah, like I have to behave a certain way in this place. It also will affect you physically, which is another point of, thank you, Opera, good acting, is you let things around you affect you. Your environment, your props, your costumes, other actors. Like, for example, when we were in Groundlings with Ben and we did improv, thank you, Bender, we were given an example where somebody had a baby, imaginary baby, right? And then halfway through the scene, the baby was gone. And if you as an actor are present, you'll be like, yo, you dropped the baby! And the audience will laugh at it because it's funny. But if nobody acknowledges that the baby just evaporated, then the audience is going to be like, oh, they suck. So acknowledging the circumstances and letting them affect you is what makes for good acting. And then within each scene, you will find beats and tactics. Now, again, I personally don't necessarily like that or use it there that often unless I really can't figure out how to say something. But it is a very useful exercise to just play around with your text and see where it sits and how it feels. What you do, it's called actioning your text. So each time the thought in the scene changes, which happens in scenes, usually it's a pause, it's a change of direction, it's a change of what your character is doing, it's a change of thought. Every time the thought changes, it's a beat. And every new beat will have a mini little objective and a mini little obstacle within it. And to figure it out, the easy way to do is actioning, where you break your text down into beats, and then you think about how you want to affect the other person in the scene. Like, what is it you're trying to do to the other character that you're talking to? And to do that, you will use transitive verbs. Thesaurus is very useful for this, such as to beg, to entice, to charm, to get sympathy, to hurt. And you will put these tactics into every beat aligned with your objective. So you're trying to get something from this character, and how you're going to do it is, first you're going to try to do this, and then you're going to try to do this, and then you're going to try to do this, and then you're going to try to do this in different beats. Thank you, Rain. And again, I personally don't necessarily like this because it feels very technical and not very organic, but it is a good thing to do if you're having a complicated scene and you just can't quite figure out why are you saying this and how are you saying this. As an exercise, it's useful to do. Last thing I'm going to say, and then I'm going to pass it on to my colleagues over here, is when you're on set, after all this work has been done, after you know exactly what you're doing, all of your lines, who you are, like, you might have forgotten who you are at that point, right? After all this work, and just know where your character is. When on set, there is five steps to making this said scene happen. First is the blocking, which is physically arranging what are you doing during the scene. Second is lighting. So once the scene is blocked, the director of photography and the gaffer are going to light the scene.
Bustin' makes me feel good.
The third one is going to be the rehearsal, where you kind of run through the whole scene with the blocking and with the lighting and see if everything works. The director sees if everything works. The actors see if everything works for them. Fourth one will be the adjustments. Again, you will fix the lighting, you will move the camera a little bit, you will change something that didn't work. And then the last one is shooting, and voila, you can forget about it once it's shot. Remember about specific point of view. Remember about letting everything affect you, and remember about living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. Mic drop. Here you go. And thank you, Jessica. All right.
That was a totally masterclass about acting that I was like, oh my god, this is amazing.
In exactly 29 minutes. That'll be $600.
All right. Well, if you guys want to add anything to it, or if you want to start talking about your character specifically, we can do that.
I don't really have anything to add at this point because, yeah, that sort of is the process. And like you said, it varies from characters you have. Sometimes it's like you said, it can be like a background, almost like you bring a coffee, and so for that you kind of just have. You know, you don't want to go too crazy with creating something like because you can go creating like, oh my god, she says puts this coffee, but then in the second moment she goes commit suicide or something. I don't know. So like you ground yourself and you just make it livable.
So you think you're gonna right now you're in the process of understanding the character, or you think the character is just like it doesn't have depth, or it is worth?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just adding. I'm just like,
oh, okay.
It's not about this. No. No. But I can start talking about my character.
Actually, Ben, I would like to talk a little bit about physicality, because I know that you use it a lot for your characters, like the virtuoso character in the comedy play that you did back in Ukraine, and a lot of actors.
Okay.
There are different types of actors, right? And a lot of actors will ground their work in their inner world, but some actors come to their character from the physicality, like Johnny Depp, for example, right? So Ben is one of those actors who likes to find his characters through physicality. So talk about that a little bit.
It's it comes from the background that you create for your character, and then based on that you figure out based on who the person is, his posture, the way he moves, like, because like, you know, like I'm like this, but the character is necessarily going to be like that. It's like either he's more like posture or whatever, and how he's gestured or something like that. And in the scene, you just kind of you play with those movements. That's at least how I usually do it. I see the scene, I did my background, and then I just get on my feet and start moving around, and I just try different things. Weird, they look weird. They, like, if you look from a side, but it's just an odd experience that you do, and then all of a sudden it kind of clicks. Like, something starts to feel natural. Like, oh, this movement or this gesture or this how you present yourself feels natural. Maybe you do something like some big movement, and it at first it doesn't feel natural, but then you work yourself through it, and then you're like, oh, and then because you basically, you kind of rehearse your body movements of a character. You know that these features that the character does, and then when you live your life, you're yourself, and when you go on set, you remember, oh, I move like this. When you start doing those movements, your character comes to life, and you're in it. Like, you bet your background is already, like, it kind of downloads your brain. Okay, that is how he moves.
How do you figure out those movements? Like, how do you know that this character moves in a certain way? Because you do a previous work?
Yeah. First, you do the writing. First, like, you answer all those questions. What's going on?
Same there.
Where was I? It comes from the background first.
So, and you take out...
Actually,
from the script? Oh, sorry.
Cameo pointed out very correctly that voice and accent are also part of that. For example, I know that Meryl Streep went and lived in a small village on the border of Germany and Poland for 6 months at one point, so she can get the correct exact accent for her character. Now, she's psycho, like, in a good way. But accent will be part of your character and will be part of a physical choice of your character, the way they sound. Maybe they're, like, kind of nasally and they talk like this. Or maybe they're, like, very, you know, like, over here, and they're like, sorry, guys, sorry. Or maybe, it's even things like having a lisp, or, like, Stallone has that thing, right, or that condition where he, like, only talks out of one side of his mouth. That could also be a character choice. Any kind of, disability or any kind of old injuries. For example, maybe your character is limping. Maybe your character is so stressed they're always like this, right? Their shoulders are just like always there, or their jaw is always clenched when they talk, or they're making a lot of movements and a lot of gestures when they're talking because they're all crazy and high energy and spastic, right? Or vice versa, your character is very regal and they just hold their hands like so and have a very calm disposition, and speak with a lot of enunciation, you know. So all of that physicality is going to help you find your character as well. And some actors pursue their work from that angle, and I've seen Ben do it, where he finds his character and kind of analyzes it backwards from how it feels in his body first, and then like adding layers onto it.
Wanted to add that sometimes in like fantasy genre specifically, I think the producer or like the writer, they make sort of a choice of an accent where which characters speak, because like, well, usually but like when you're, again,
it'll be informed by the script. You're not gonna like outlandishly choose Kazakh accent if you're like in a play about British royalty, right? Like, it's going to be informed by your script.
Which actually is a good question. I don't think, like, which, that, are we going to be, like, a British RP?
Like, that's what I was thinking, like...
Because usually that's what we think about medieval pieces. They're always, like, Britishy.
What is the accent that we're gonna go for? Is gonna be Britishy, or is there an accent that you know that it is like specifically for?
We're gonna talk like this, sweetie.
Yeah, we're gonna do transatlantic, right?
We're gonna talk like this.
Well, we have to make that choice altogether because we all have to have at least a somewhat similar way of speaking, which will be difficult, seeing how all of us have different accents.
Technically, sorry, just thinking about this, like, perhaps we probably have our own Elvish language, and for some reason we speak English, so we probably have an accent.
Alright, how about everybody does Russian accent? How does that sound? We're Russian elves.
Mexican accent, guys.
Russian elf. I am a Russian elf.
No, I kind of like Lima's idea. We gotta do Mexican accents. When
Ren, if we do Mexican accents, we're just all gonna sound racist as shit. Well, maybe not you, but but the rest of us. All right, but yeah, jokes aside, that is a good point. Abby, do you have anything to add?
Just you kind of were jogging my memory to when we were learning about the psychological gestures. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Where you can.
Sorry.
Yeah, that can be yours.
Yeah.
So the psychological gesture would be something that you choose for your character, and it's almost like a tick or just a gesture that you do that is very unique to your character. Like, we all have psychological gestures. Whether that's the way you flip your hair. Like, I have a friend who, when she's talking, she'll, like, talk with her hands, and she always does this. You know, like, even if it's not really in her face, she just does that. Like, just, or, you know, just any kind of little thing that makes you very unique. The tapping on, I had a character that I had a cane, and just my psychological gesture was just tapping on the cane when I was irritated like this, you know?
Also, if you watch yourself, you will realize that you have some of those gestures yourself. Like, for example, my dad, I used to do it too just because I was taking over him, but I thankfully got rid of it. But if he's deep in thought or nervous, he'll do this. Or he'll just, like, chew on his cheek. That's one of those things. Yeah, it's one of those things that, like, he would do. I kind of, like, bite my lips or purse my lips a lot when I'm thinking. A lot of people will, like, scratch, right, when they're thinking.
Weird.
That's like a throat, like
driving
throat without even thinking about it. He'll just do like a.
Yeah.
Is what I'm thinking.
You can also use that, by the way. I personally have used that as a trick before. If I know I have a deeply, like, if I know that my character is a fucking disaster and they have a lot of deeply emotional scenes and I have to get, like, fucked up on command, I will basically, like, Pavlov myself, right? I will have some kind of a little gesture or a little word that I will say or do, and I will repeatedly piss myself off while doing or saying that gesture or word and get myself insane repeatedly, multiple times over the period of time, so that when I'm on set, I can just do this gesture and start crying, right? Because sometimes as an actor, you're just not, you know, like, you're not in a perfect state for acting for whatever reason. And having those little tricks in your back pocket can be useful for those moments. Or I had an example where I was not in agreement with the director about how my character should react in the scene, which happens, by the way. I was not in agreement with the director about how my character should act in the scene. She wanted a very loud, dramatic reaction to something I thought was not truthful and my character would react quietly to. But I had to listen to the director because, you know, ultimately they're the boss. And I had to get freaked out and cry and sob and scream and curse all the gods. And to get there, I just used the fact that I was really frustrated with the director who was not understanding my point. So instead of crying about my dead grandpa, I was crying about the director being an ass. But you know what? On screen, it read the correct way and nobody knew.